Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today I'm going to show you the final round game from the European Amateur Chess Championship. This was round 9 and it's my second favorite game of the tournament. If you've seen the previous video, then you'll know that I missed several winning chances in round 8 and I was frustrated, and this game was played the following morning quite early at 9 o'clock. And I didn't have much time to prepare because I wanted to sleep, and I was facing an opponent whom I've played before. I actually beat him, I want to say 3 years ago, when he was 1700. Now he is very close to 2200. He won a lot of rating points at this tournament and in some others, I guess. And he plays e4, and against the Caro-Kann, he plays the advanced variation. So I basically knew that I was going to get this position. And against bishop f5, he almost always plays the Tal. So I was fairly certain I was going to get this. Now, whenever I face the Tal, or whenever I used to face it, I used to play pawn to h5, which is objectively the best move according to the engine. But late that evening, I decided, okay, I'm just going to play h6, which is a move I love playing in blitz chess, and it's a tricky move which leads to very sharp positions. And I was of the opinion that Marin, my opponent, could outplay me in slow positions, but if we get a mad tactical position, which I'm more familiar with and which he doesn't know well, then I could gain an edge. So I played pawn to h6. Now the way to punish h6 is to play pawn to g4. And Karpov, Anand, Erwin Lamy, Wang Hao, Alexander Grishchuk, they've all had this position before. And the main move is bishop to d7. Again, objectively the best move. But I played the move I love playing in blitz. I played bishop to e4. And now you have to play f3. And now the bishop retreats to h7. And the downside of this for black is that white has e6. This pawn cannot be taken. If f is 6, then simply bishop to d3 and white has a big advantage. Even more importantly than his currently big advantage is that black is never going to be able to develop his king side. So against e6 you play queen to d6 takes and king takes. And this is sort of the starting position of the variation. At this point, I was playing instantly and I had way more time than I'd started with. You get a 30-second increment per move. And my opponent, I'm gonna say, had already spent 10 minutes or so. On his next move, he spent another 15, or maybe even more. I remember walking around the tournament hall for a long time. And at some point during the next 2 or 3 moves, he was way under an hour. I think on move 10, I had an hour and a half, which is what we'd started with, and he had like 45 minutes. So, first goal was achieved. He was unfamiliar with the position. More importantly, I knew the position, and I knew that I could continue playing relatively quickly. Now, of course, the downside for black is that black cannot castle. This rook is going to be hard to develop, and the main strategic aim is to break the center with e5. If black achieves e5 in conjunction with knight d7 and rook e8, very often black can win in a couple of moves. Because, as you can see, black has 2 pieces developed, white has 0. And white has moved all of his kingside pawns. Queen to g3 could be a move. And this position could get scary for white very quickly. Again, it's double-edged. There are 2 main moves here. One of them is f4, the other is bishop to d3. My opponent played bishop to d3. I think that's inferior. f4 is the best move for a reason. It has 2 purposes. Prevents bishop queen to g3, which is less important. It prevents e5, which is more important. But the downside of f4 is that white is wasting another move to move a pawn, and to move a pawn in front of his king. The e4 square is now available, so knight f6, attacking the pawn on g4, and attacking the e4 square is the most natural idea. Here, white can choose between 2 moves. Bishop h3, defending the pawn, runs into c5, and I think black should have a big advantage, practically speaking. The engine says all zeros, but black has a big lead in development. Knight c6 is now coming, and The best move should be g5, hg, hg, and knight e4, and I would always choose to play black here This is just very pleasant. And the other way to play against knight f6 is to play knight f3, against which knight g4 can be played, and after bishop to h3, h5. Here white should be slightly better. I think this is an improvement for white, because white gets e5 and g5. Okay, but still pawn to f4 should be the best move. My opponent played bishop to d3, and I can understand why this move is tempting if you don't know the position. I knew the position and I'd prepared it in detail for this game, and you'd think that black has to take, but black doesn't have to take. Taking on d3 actually develops white's queen and wastes a ton of time. You could take, it's not a bad move, but e5 is much stronger. Also, knight to d7 instead of e5 is also strong. Okay, so he took on h7, rook takes h7, and he played knight e2. Probably better is d5, queen e5, and then knight e2, followed by knight to d7 and knight c3 and so on. And when I was analyzing this game afterwards, I realized that there was a game which we actually followed for another 5 or 6 moves, played between my favorite Croatian player Robert Zelčić with the black pieces, who is the best Caro-Kann player in Croatia, against Zoran Jovanović, another Croatian grandmaster, and they actually reached the same position. So my opponent played knight e2, I went knight d7, knight bc3, knight gf6, queen to d3, okay, and here I had a chance to gain a winning advantage. I played rook e8, and I played it fairly quickly, just improving another one of my pieces. It turns out that c5 is almost winning. The pawn cannot be taken. Whichever pawn you take, I take with the knight and gain a huge edge. For example, here and queen d1, and now simply d4. This is overwhelming. And after c5, if white does nothing, I don't know, rook g1, then I can just take. So c5, huge advantage. I played rook e8, and as I said, we're still following the game between the two Croatian grandmasters, which neither of us knew. Bishop to e3 was played, and here I was thinking c5 or e4, because his king is still stuck in the center. When your opponent's king is stuck on e1, you want to open the position up. Unfortunately, I couldn't make e4 work. If e4, then fe4 and de4, and I'm not sure what I'm doing here. The queen moves I can take, but then white castles queenside, and this pawn is sort of in the way of my attack, so I couldn't make that work. Also c5, can take dc5, and after knight c5, bishop c5, queen c5, again castles queenside. I couldn't see anything here. In fact, white should be much better here. So I took on d4, and he has to take with the bishop. If he takes with the knight, I play c5, d4. So bishop takes, and now knight e5. Bishop takes, knight is forced because I'm threatening to take on f3, or play knight c4 if queen to e3. So bishop e5, queen e5. Castles, and here I knew that I had a good position, and I knew that most endgames should be good for me, so I played queen e3 check. Okay, and I was really happy here. So queen e3, queen e3, it's not forced, you can play king b1, but he took. Okay, rook takes. And this is the last move where we were following Jovanović Zelčić. It was actually played in 2017. Black did win the game. In that game, white played rook d to f1. In our game, my opponent played rook h to f1. And from here on, I misplayed the position. Here, black is still superior, vastly superior. My next move is okay, bishop to b4. It loses most of my advantage, but it's okay. If you turn on the engine wants to play g6, which I didn't even consider. It wants to play bishop c5, which I didn't even consider. I wanted to pin the knights, and I wanted to double his c-pawns. The idea behind g6 is to play bishop g7 and then drop the rook down. I didn't consider that. So I played bishop to b4, which made sense in my mind. He played king to d2. I dropped the rook back to e7. And after a3, I cannot take the knight, obviously. I should play bishop c5 or bishop to d6. Bishop d6 has to be the best move, and here is why. My opponent has a threat in this position. The threat is to get the knight to f5 via one of these squares. I think bishop d6 is the safest move. Bishop c5 sort of prevents one idea, but it allows the other idea. He played b4, and here I made a big mistake. Again, either bishop b6 to c7 should be good, or simply bishop to d6. I played bishop e3 check, thinking that I'm gaining something. But after king d3, I realized that I'm in trouble. So I need to get my pieces into play. I need to get my stupid rook from h7 to e8. But my opponent has a threat. He's threatening knight to g3, knight to f5, winning a piece. And I'm gonna have to meet that with something defending d6 if I don't want to lose an exchange on e8. So if I want to get this rook to e8, I need to make sure that I'm not blundering my bishop on d6, or excuse me, on e3, and that I'm not blundering a check on d6, winning the rook on e8. So I had to calculate precisely here. I played rook h8. He played knight g3, and I did play rook h to e8 in this position. And after knight f5, I can simply play rook e6. So my bishop is defended twice, the d6 square is defended. So everything is sort of okay. Unfortunately, I lost all of my advantage, and with this great knight on f5, white is basically equal. So bishop e3 check, huge mistake. Had I played bishop d6, I wouldn't have had to lose that many tempi. Okay, rook d1 played, bishop f4. As I said, it's equal now. He's contesting the d file. Takes, takes. Knight e2 played, attacks my bishop. Finally, my bishop drops to a good diagonal. He has these two squares, but I have something of my own. Knight e to d4, rook e8. Okay. So now the only thing I could hope for an advantage is that this bishop is going to be better than one of the knights. Obviously, I cannot play g6. Also, in the position before knight f5, I couldn't play g6 here, because after g6, he can simply play h5 and win the f5 square back. And also, I weaken myself irreparably. I'm going to have a weakness on h6. So, coming back to this position, after knight e2, bishop c7, knight e4, rook e8, I think what white has to do is somehow gain space on the king side with, for example, h5, secure the g6 square, and then, for example, here I'm just going to make nothing moves for black. Once white achieves something like this and puts the other knight to on f5, I'm sure I'm worse. So if he'd played h5, I have no idea what I would have done. I would be very scared at this position. Probably I would have played knight to d7, trying to contest the g6 square and put pressure on the pawn on f3. Fortunately for me, he played c4, which gives my knight the d5 square. And c4 is a big strategic mistake, because my knight on f6 is useless for the moment. And after takes, king takes, my knight on d5 is the best piece on the board. It's better than the knight on f5, because I'm threatening knight e3. In this position, my opponent played h5. And now, pause the video, black to play and win. Okay, so in this position, black is winning very simply. I missed the win, unfortunately, and I had a lot of time on the clock. I'm not sure exactly how much, but close to an hour. There is a very simple threat in this position, and that's a rook mate. So you play rook e3, and white can resign. White can resign. The only thing white can do is give up a piece by giving his king a square. So, of course, if this is taken, then black wins a piece. I don't know, king somewhere, and I take, and I'm a bishop up. So after rook e3, white loses a piece. Either takes the rook, Let me just show you if white does nothing. I don't know, a4, rook c3 mate. Okay. The best move should be knight to b5, which if my opponent finds, then fine. I'll have to find the refutation, and I saw it immediately when I was analyzing this. Bishop e5, and now the knight is hanging, mate is hanging, there are no options here. If king c5, for example, then I can simply defend my knight, and this knight drops. The knight has no squares. So again, a piece down. Unfortunately, I didn't see that, and I simplified with knight e3, and now it's dead even. So takes, and this is move 33. My opponent had 7 or 8 minutes left. Coming back to the start of the game, when he used a lot of time in the opening, which is correct because he didn't know it, and he did manage to equalize and sort of outplay me from a worse position. Unfortunately, with I don't remember exactly how much, I think 7, 8 or 9 minutes on the clock, he played the losing blunder here. I was expecting this game to end in a draw, and I honestly, at this point, I couldn't see a way for either side to win. We both have a pawn majority. His is more advanced, but my bishop blockades the dark squares perfectly, and if we trade rooks, it's a draw. If we trade minor pieces, it's a draw. He probably continues with a4 and starts destroying my majority somehow. But he lost the game in one move. I didn't see why this loses before he played it. When he played it, I saw it immediately. He played knight c2. And again, pause the video, black to play and win. This one is much simpler than rook e3. This is actually a mating net, and black plays pawn to b5 check. And if you play king c5, then I play rook c3 and win your knight. And if you play king to d4, then this is mate. And after b5, my opponent resigned. I mean, if he had more time on the clock, he wouldn't have missed this. But it's weird that a pawn, bishop and rook mate the king in the center of the board. I don't think I've ever seen that. So after b5, it's obviously game over. It's all zeros here. There are several fine moves which he could have played. a4 actually prevents b5, so after a4 you could go knight c2. a4 is actually very natural, defending the pawn. Yeah, unfortunately for my opponent, he blundered that. I was really sorry for him. I thought the game should end in a draw because he defended well, even though he didn't know the position, and even though he got outplayed because of my preparation. So yeah, we discussed it after the game. We analyzed some positions. I should mention one more position that we analyzed, which I think is strategically important. Let me try to find that position. But maybe it's not this one, but we were analyzing this pattern. I was trying to... one more reason why I played bishop to e3 was to at some point play pawn to d4 and let's say knight c4 to get the d5 square for my knight, but I just couldn't make this work. I think he can always undermine me with c3, and I don't have enough defense for my bishop. So this is a pattern we analyzed. We also analyzed the position here. Yeah, whether e4 works. He also thought c5 was good here, but I was afraid of knight b5, and so on. So he is a good guy, stronger player than me. I wish him the best of luck in his future tournaments, and he should probably not get into time trouble in the opening. That's something he has to work on. Thank you for watching. In the end, I won 48 FIDE rating points at this tournament, finished in 11th place with 5.5, so it was a great tournament, probably the best one I've ever played. Definitely rating-wise, the best one. I had 2 losses, 4 wins, and 3 draws. Could have been better, could have been worse also. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. See you, well, shortly with some more tournament games. Bye-bye.